So when I was at Art Center, there's besides having a baby between my seventh and eighth semesters, um, there was about three different things that really impacted my life. And the first one was sort of looking around at the different majors that was around. So I was in graphic design, and I'd sit in class, and a lot of the designers, all they cared about was like pretty colors and typefaces, and so I was, that was great and all, but I wanted more. And then there was like the ad students, and these guys they would look like they just came from Dunkin' Donuts or from a pizza place, and they had been smoking or something like that, and and they'd have just crazy ideas, just wild brain ideas, and I loved ideas, but they were really bad designers. So I thought, well, maybe I can sort of take the big idea sort of things that they would have. And then there was these environmental design students, and I'd never heard of that, and I didn't quite understand it all. When I go look at the portfolio show, I would see, like these really cool things with like a book explaining what it was, and I never understood any of the text that they were writing, but the materials and the way that they use space just really inspired me. So I sort of try to take the best parts of all those, or at least that's what I tried to do myself. And so that was the first thing. And the second was that I met this guy named Roland Young, and he he said something that was really impactful to me. He said, you can create a portfolio like anyone else, or you can create a portfolio like everyone else at Art Center and stand in line for a job, or you can create your own portfolio and create your own job. And I thought, wow, that is awesome. I want to do that. So I don't know what that job is, but I want to create my own job someday. And so I ended up doing an independent study with him, and you guys know about Galco's. It's in Highland Park. They sell like 400 kinds of soda, and they're all in bottles. And so the essence of this place is the bottle, and the soda that you get in that bottle is much better because they use sugar cane instead of corn syrup, and it just tastes better in a bottle. And so I started to play around with bottles, and the reason is because I started out trying to do a logo. And he said, Dan, you're just too practical. That's all you do is too practical and makes you like stick inside of a box. You should just go play. And you're so practical that all your things that don't seem practical will become practical. And I was nervous because it was almost, I was going to graduate pretty soon. I needed to have a portfolio, and he's telling me to just go play. And so I was like, I don't know. So I did it anyways. And so I started to play with these bottles and, kind of stack them up, and they look kind of cool. And then I thought, wouldn't it be cool to, stack them on top of the building and light them up somehow? And then I was always interested in the way that ice cream trucks drove around, and you'd hear them before you'd see them. And so I love the way in which you blow on bottles, and they make noises. And so this one didn't work though, so I was putting these bottles on top, and then I got my friend who was an illustrator, and that one didn't work either, unfortunately. But I got the right angle and the right distance, and it made this beautiful noise. It go woo 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 woo. And so I thought, wouldn't this be cool, so uh, So I have a friend who has perfect pitch, and she went around all these different bottles, and they'd all make different notes, and she could tell me what they all were. And I don't know anything about music, and this is a big part of me is I don't know how to do anything actually. But once I find an idea that I think is really cool, then I go after it with all I have. And so I want to make a pipe organ. And another thing, I can't draw either. So Nick is disgusted at me because I can't draw at all. But, that forced me to take pictures and that sort of thing. So I didn't know how to do any of this, but I knew something like that existed somewhere. And it just so happened that's a solenoid, and I went down to C&H Hardware when that existed, and they happened to have them there, and then we built this thing. And for my grad show, this was like a three-dimensional, wild-looking science project, and when someone would press the keyboard, this would actually make music, and they were like, wow, this is cool. So the point of this independent study wasn't to like finish anything, it was just to sort of come up with a bunch of ideas, xylophones, and then I ended up making a poster, of some sort. So, whoops. So the last thing that really inspired me was that when I sat in a seat right back there, I kind of wandered in on some talk. I didn't know what it was about, but there was an artist who was working at Caltech. And he was working with scientists. And what he said just blew me away, and I can't go into all of it. But I remember from that moment, I said, you know, I don't want to work for Nike. I don't want to work for these other companies. I want to work with scientists who have these like crazy big ideas. You know, they're sort of like the ad students, except they like blow things up and try to understand the history of the universe. And so through a series of things, I ended up not there. I ended up at this really cool place called the Jet Propulsion Lab, and it's right up the street, and they do lots of cool things. So there's a lot of satellites that are going around the Earth that it's studying different things about the Earth, you know, climate and that sort of things. We send spacecrafts to Mars and to, you know, other planets, and then we have telescopes that look out beyond at other galaxies. And you know, this is normally the way that you get to JPL. But I tried to find a different path. So I'd love to tell you about the giant envelope, but I can't right now. But so I ended up, got passed on to a few different people at JPL, and they ended up saying, hey, you know, we'd love to have you do like animations for us. And I said, you know, I would do that. I would love to do that, but that's not my passion. I showed them the bottle stuff. And they're like, wow, this is really strange, you know? And so they literally said, you know, I don't really understand what you do, but we like it. You have 6 months, and we'll see what happens. And so I've been there for about 8 years now. And so the first thing that I did when I got there was that they were trying to come up with missions that will find planets around other stars. And to me, that just blows my mind that you can find planets around other stars. And they would tell me all these big numbers, and I didn't, you know, obviously I didn't understand all the numbers. So I need to make something that helped me understand what they were talking about. And so, so here we go. So if a grain of sand were a galaxy, we're in the Milky Way galaxy. There's billions of stars in our galaxy. So if a grain were a galaxy, you'd need 6 roomfuls, or you know, somewhat about this entire space, full of sand to show all the galaxies in the known universe. So wow, that's a lot, right? So I just kind of had a bunch of sand around, but I had a magnifying glass. And under this magnifying glass, I was able to put a single grain of sand. And what's cool about a place like JPL is that I could go to a guy and say, hey, I have this grain of sand. Could you drill a hole into it for me? And they would say, I don't know about that. And the next guy I go, wow, that sounds cool. Let's do it. And so this is the magnifying glass. This is a grain of sand. And that right down there is a little tiny hole that they drilled into it. And so if this were our galaxy, at the time that I did this, we'd found hundreds of planets within that little teeny area of our galaxy, let alone the rest of the galaxy, let alone the rest of the universe. And now we just launched another satellite that's found hundreds and thousands more planets. So I guess this is out of date now, but it made an impact when you saw it at the very beginning. So one of the difficult parts about finding planets around stars is that stars are really big and bright, and the things that you're looking for are really small and dim. And so there's a really bright light, and you're trying to see a really dim light. And so that's what I like to do a lot of times is just sort of work on a phrase and see what I can do with it. And so where I'd have a really bright light. I actually had an 18,000 watt spotlight shining against a wall. At the same time, I'd project a movie against the wall. But you couldn't see the movie because this light was so bright. But people love to do shadow puppets, so they jump in front of it and they block out the bright light, and inside their shadow they can see the dim light. And whenever you get like techie people around, they're like, oh, he's using image subtraction, video image subtraction or something like that. And just like, I swear I had to like argue with this guy to tell him that no, it's just 2 projectors. So I'd have a really dim projector that would be way up at an angle, and then the bright projection would be lower. And an 18,000 watt spotlight is a little bit difficult to take around. You need 100 amps to start it, and that's a lot. And so I ended up being able to figure out, this is the way I do it now, where I have 2 projectors, and I use this sort of orangey, pixely things for simulating the sun and the imagery that you would see. Some of it's water because we're looking for evidence of water. And this was at that was in your presentation. So there's another mission that's going to go to Jupiter. And Jupiter is a giant gassy planet. And one of the cool things about this mission is that right now you see this really beautiful sort of storms that are up there, but we really don't know what's going on underneath the surface. And so this mission, its job, one of its many jobs, is sort of to give us our first view underneath the surface, because they wonder, what's making all these storms? There's no solid ground, so like there's no place for you to go stand and build a building. It's all just a bunch of gas. And so I got to do a big test of a project up at the Exploratorium a couple months ago. And this is a huge sort of fog container. And the idea is that I'm going to be putting lots of infrared lights underneath of this. And so infrared, you can't see it with your eyes, but your cell phone camera can see it. And so the idea is that you walk up to this thing and you're not really sure what it is, but a lot of people, this is my typography. I haven't been doing typography for a long time, but this is the name of the mission right there. Projecting on fog looks really, really cool. So the idea is there's going to be lots of infrared lights, and you'll be able to see, something. I haven't figured all this out. It's going to go in at the Pasadena Museum of California Art in Old Town area in September. So I need to figure it out by then. But there's going to be a bunch of infrared lights that you wouldn't be able to see until you take out your camera and sort of look at it that way. Now, unfortunately, I can't tell you all about the project I'm most excited about. But if you hear about a famous scientist becoming a moon of Jupiter for a year, you didn't hear it here, but you might hear about it in the future. So those are all projects that I've been doing at JPL. Now, I don't just do that at JPL. I do lots of other things, and these are more of my passion types of projects. But I got to do projects outside, and one was actually here. There was a show called Observe. And this piece was called, I gotta remember what it's called. It was called The Past is Present. And so the idea is when you look up at the stars, you see all these things, and they sort of look like they're on the same plane up in space. And they're really like vastly different distances away. And they're so far away from each other that they're actually, the light that you're seeing is from different times. So you might see a star here, and that light is 1 million years old, or whatever. And this light is 1 billion years old. So you're looking at them at the same time as if they're still both there, but this one may not exist anymore. So it's sort of like I'm looking at this room, and you guys are from, 10,000 BC, and you guys are from, 0, and you guys are now. And it looks like you're all here at the same time, but you're really not. So think about that next time you look up at the sky. So when you walk into this, you see a clock, and that's sort of your first view, but you start to realize that it's not a clock. It's actually a bunch of different disks that are at different distances, and they're all different sizes. And so it's sort of like a dolly experience kind of walking into this thing. And you hear all these voices, and you're not really sure what the voices are. And you eventually notice that there's speakers behind all of these. And you find this sort of microphone thing. It says, "Talk to me." And people kind of go over and they say, "Hello." And when you speak into a microphone, you expect something to happen. But nothing happens. So you say, "Hello," and they all kind of look at each other, and they're like, "This thing's broken." And then in about 5 or 10 seconds, you hear "hello." And then in about 20 seconds, you hear "hello" again. And then in 5 hours or a month or 3 months later, you might hear your voice again. So it's kind of fun to play with it, because you start to talk into it, and then you talk into it and talk into it, and you start talking with your old self, with yourself a few seconds ago, with a few more minutes ago. And also kind of interesting to deal with consequences. People like to say stupid things in it. And so those stupid things come back, and you may not, appreciate that later on. And there were some happy accidents in this, where the masking was just so where there were all these shadows that sort of gave the sense of what's that called, an eclipse. So this is just my last project that I'll show. I got an email from the San Jose city of, the city of San Jose, and they wanted to have a hanging sculpture at the new San Jose airport. And I had a friend who wins these types of public things, and called him up and said, "Are you going to do this thing?" And he said, "No, I'm not going to be in the country at the time. He's doing projects elsewhere." And he said, "You should submit for it." And I said, "No, I'm not the kind of person who wins these types of things." And so he said, "No, you have to do it." And so when NedCon tells you to do something, you do it. And so I called up a couple of my friends and a couple of folks that you might know. One guy over here is named Nick, and the other guy is Aaron Koblin. And we ended up getting selected to create a hanging sculpture. I've never done a hanging sculpture. I know Aaron's never done a hanging sculpture. Nick does lots of hanging sculptures. So we had this opportunity to be in this brand new place, and they're going to put a huge skylight right over the spot that we're going to do our work. And they wanted something that was sort of new media. And normally, my experience with new media is you love to have a dark room, and it's controlled light and all that sort of stuff. This was like there's no control, there's lots of light, and so what are you going to do? And conceptually, what we wanted to do is create a cloud. Clouds are, it's my favorite time. Well, it's the most beautiful point of flying, although that's also the time that you get the most, turbulence when you're going up. And what we wanted to do is sort of create something, a cloud that would be run by data. And so the idea would be is if you had a cloud that was in San Jose, and then you picked it up and you took it to, somewhere in Europe, and then you took it to somewhere in South America, and you sort of saw what happened to it based upon the weather in those different areas. And so, how do you make a cloud in a airport? And so we found this material. It's liquid crystal, and so when there's no power, it's opaque, and then you add a little bit of power, and it's transparent. And so people have used these things in like bathrooms and that sort of thing, real high-end stuff. But what we ended up doing is we ended up hanging thousands of these things, and so what's happening is that we're getting real-time weather data from around the world, and about every 20 seconds we switch to a new city, and whatever the weather is in that particular place changes the behavior of our cloud. And so here's a display, and it's showing you the list of cities. It's going to go to Kathmandu here pretty soon. And so there's no wind, but there's light rain, so it sort of feels like it's raining. So if it's really windy, it'll look like it's windy, and it'll look like the wind is blowing in that whatever direction it's actually blowing in that particular city. And if it's LA, then usually this thing doesn't do anything. It's really boring. Just to kind of show a little bit more of how this particular thing works. The programming is such so that we have a huge list of names, and the software looks for the most interesting weather in the world, and it puts them in a queue of about 20, and then it arranges them such that each individual city is different, quite a bit different from the next, so it doesn't become boring after a while. So if you happen to be in San Jose, if you fly southwest from Burbank to San Jose, just look up, and there it is.